Hello and welcome to the program UFO Warning. In this episode, we're talking about pastors briefed on UFOs. That's correct, pastors briefed on UFOs. Now, this story's been getting some traction. Pastors coming forward saying that they've gotten some kind of briefing on the UFO situation. It all ties in with the Trump disclosure, this notion of the U.S. having captured alien ships and even some sort of alien hybrid breeding program going on. A lot of really weird stuff. I went ahead and I did my normal consultation with AI here because there's just so much information out there just to try to get a little bit of an overview of what's happening. It says pastors, UFO briefings, and disclosure, what's being claimed. The trigger is that imminent government UFO disclosure is about to happen. Now, we all know that Trump's been talking about releasing these UFO files. Still haven't seen them yet. The current controversy is tied to the anticipated U.S. government release of UFO files, and officials, including FBI Director Kash Patel, have publicly said documents on UFOs and possible non-human intelligence could be released very soon. It just seems like everybody and their dog is on this, saying all these agencies' heads, they all want to have their moment in the sun, and still we don't have anything really that I can see of consequence being released. Now, this follows a broader political push toward transparency around UFOs, part of the long-running disclosure movement, and this expected release is the backdrop for everything else. The idea that society, especially religion, needs to prepare. Now, of course, there aren't nearly as many people that go to church now, I suppose, as before COVID, but there's still a large number of folks that do attend church regularly or maybe just once a month. But this idea that a large segment of the population is, at least in their own minds, somewhat religious, and so the idea of these alien life forms showing up could, I think the government thinks, could really throw a wrench in things. Now, the core claim here is that these pastors have been secretly briefed by officials. Here we go again. And what I don't like about this is somebody, has the knowledge or claims to have the knowledge, is setting up another group of gatekeepers. I mean, you already have all of the former UFO intel guys, Louis Elizondo, even to David Grush, to Christopher Mellon. They kind of run the gauntlet. They run the spectrum of trust, in my opinion. But they're all from this intelligence community, and they are almost as if they've been set up as gatekeepers. And then maybe you have former scientists. A lot of them aren't doing so well right now. And then now you have these pastors coming forward. Most of these guys aren't just a pastor down the street. They're somebody with a little bit of notoriety already. Maybe they have a television program or internet presence, and it's almost as if they're being set up as gatekeepers for another market segment, as if they're getting ready to roll this narrative out. I have a lot of questions. My spidey senses are going off the wall on this one. Now, it tells us that a small group of Christian leaders were privately contacted or briefed by U.S. intelligence or military-connected figures. That's a claim. These briefings allegedly warned of evidence of non-human entities or craft, possible videos or materials of extraterrestrial origin, and the potential for public shock and confusion. Some accounts go further, claiming references to reptilian beings or non-human materials, though these details are unverified and come from secondhand testimony. This idea of these reptilian creatures, this goes clear back to David Icke and a lot of others talking about these reptile-looking creatures. Now, it's important that there's been no official confirmation and that the claims originate from pastors and media amplification, and these are not documented government releases. But there again, look what they do with this stuff. Look what happened with the Tic Tac videos and the Go Fast. They release them in this very kind of clouded environment and allow it to bubble up into the zeitgeist, and then they come along maybe a couple years later and say, oh yeah, by the way, this is all true. Narrative control. It says why pastors in fear of a religious crisis. Well, look what they did during that last let's just call it flu outbreak, when they had certain very famous pastors come out and endorse the injection that they were giving people. So it's market segment. You have an advertising campaign for people who are non-religion. Hey, let's go with the scientific deal here. Trust the science. You have a marketing campaign for older folks. Hey, you better get this because if you don't, it could be bad for you. You have a marketing campaign for the people, say we call them empaths, people that want to help other people. Hey, you better get this because if you don't, you could spread this thing to somebody else and you could really hurt them. You have the marketing campaign for people who only care about themselves. Hey, you better get this because you don't want to get sick. You see, so it's as if the entire society is all broke down into these major market segments, maybe 10 or 15, and messages are tailored toward each one. Just like somebody marketing soda pop or fast food. I see the same thing happening here. And so I don't see this so much as, oh, well, Trump is on this religious kick. I see this as deep state actors, probably above and beyond Trump, who have latched on to a market segment. Maybe that segment runs 15 to 25, 30% of the population that it could really appeal to. So they're like, yeah, this is great. We'll craft this message and we'll get that bunch in. And then for the other group, the people that think of themselves maybe as agnostic or atheist, but they think that they have more of a non-religious view of things, we'll craft a message for them. We'll craft a message for the people that want to be cool. So it's a market segment message being set up right here. That's how I see this. So I don't want people to think that, UFO warnings off the rails on this, trying to be religious, trying to be non-religious. I'm just telling you how I see it. Could be wrong, but how I see this whole thing right now, just in my little paranoid, doubtful mind, is that, wow, this sure looks like a marketing campaign to me. AI does make a couple good points. It says, why pastors fear of religious crisis. The most consistent theme across sources is concern about the impact on faith. According to those describing the alleged briefings, officials fear UFO disclosure could undermine literal interpretations of creation, triggering loss of faith among believers, create panic or existential confusion. And one pastor warned that believers might turn from the Christian faith if confronted with alien life narratives. Religious leaders are therefore being positioned, if the claims are true, as first responders for a spiritual crisis. Now, that's the way they're framing it, to say, well, we're worried about how people might be affected negatively by this. The way I see this is, what happens if people are religious and they believe, well, I can't steal from my neighbor or I can't commit a crime because the Bible tells me not to, and if I do that, I'll be punished. If you take that whole framework away, and suddenly a person who's believed for their whole life that, well, I have to pay taxes or God will punish me, if you take that framework away, to all of a sudden, where they don't believe in God, they've lost hope in effect, they may not be so likely to pay their taxes. They may not be so likely to obey the law. And the social environment that we operate in could become a lot less friendly. Now, we can kind of go back and look at what happened with the last situation. Now, I don't like to talk about this too much, honestly, because when that whole pandemic, what many call scamdemic, hit, I lost about half of my audience, maybe 2/3 of my audience, because a lot of people thought, I guess, that I was just being wrong about everything. I don't think I was. The evidence just shows there was so many other nefarious things going on there. I mean, for the first time in human history, the rule of women and children first didn't apply. Children were being denied medically necessary operations and procedures so that people over 60 could have a hospital bed. I would have gladly given up mine. Given that backdrop of how crazy things got for a couple of years, actually, and how some people still are just immersed in this thing. I saw a couple of people walking around yesterday with these N150 masks, whatever they're called. I mean, the huge like gas mask things on, and seeing how people acted, and seeing how the majority of people acted. Even I used to think that if the government came clean on alien life or alien entities and all this stuff, that people would accept it, that it wouldn't be that big of a deal. I no longer feel that way. I really believe there could be mass panic. And as part of that mass panic, you could have a large segment of the population that maybe they would consider themselves Christians, but they really weren't that committed, that all of a sudden would lose their faith. I mean, this is spoken about in the Bible, the Great Deception, and that maybe they would quit being law-abiding citizens. And they wouldn't even have to go out into the streets and begin to riot if they just kind of quiet quit, if they just kind of didn't comply, if they forgot to, comply with the tax man, if they forgot to comply with the speed limit, if they forgot to do a lot of things. It would be hard to punish enough of them to keep the rest from doing it. I mean, so much of what happens that makes this government work is the fact that people go along with it, people comply. And if things get too crazy, people might quit complying. And the government, from what I can see, whenever it's in their interest to use religion or a person's belief systems as a tool of control, they're happy to do it. So that's just my take on it. So they could very well be trying to get ahead of the curve on this a little bit, getting the narrative straightened out and putting it out there to get people prepared for what's coming, and bending the truth in whatever way they can to make it work out for themselves. And it goes on, it says, two competing religious interpretations are emerging. Adaption approach, and that's the mainstream Christian commentary from outlets like Premier Christianity. Christians are encouraged to engage the UFO topic seriously, not dismiss it. Their argument is that the existence of extraterrestrial life would not necessarily contradict Christianity. Theology could expand to include non-human creation. This camp treats UFOs as a theological challenge, but manageable. We've kind of heard this talk from the Pope, that he would be happy to baptize aliens. Now, there's another side of this argument, and that is spiritual warfare. And I think this is where a lot more of the conservative religious folks are going to come in at, people that interpret the Bible more literally. And this is under the deception framework, and I've talked about that here. This is a very interesting theory. From sources like Rod Dreher and some pastors, the UFO phenomena are interpreted as demonic or deceptive entities, a possible great deception scenario in biblical prophecy. And one interpretation explicitly frames UFOs not as aliens, but as a vast spiritual deception intended to confuse humanity. And this view is much more apocalyptic and defensive. Well, we've heard J.D. Vance talk about him thinking these things are demons. Although J.D., I think, is Catholic, and at the same time he calls these things demons, the last pope was talking about baptizing them. So, yeah. The narrative convergence with disclosure culture. These pastors' briefing claims align closely with long-standing themes in UFO culture. Governments know more than they reveal. Disclosure will be sudden, disruptive, and civilization-altering. The novelty here is that religion is now explicitly being inserted into the disclosure narrative. Well, they had a dry run with the manufactured flu outbreak, and I think they were pretty successful in using a lot of organized religions to move that thing the way they wanted it to go. It's crazy to me. Churches were closed down for several weeks. Meanwhile, strip clubs were left open. You could buy a pair of shoes at Target, but you couldn't buy a pair of shoes at your local shoe store. Now that's what you call behavior control right there, behavior modification. And if you think, I've been told that lots of these pastors were given large checks when they started passing out, the attached money. So this looks to me like the same kind of thing happening. It's coming down from a few what they would maybe call thought leaders, and they're preparing the narrative, maybe doing a few test runs, seeing which one works best. What story do we need to tell in order to exert the most control over the population, to keep them subservient, to keep them paying their taxes, and to keep them from going psycho and having rioting in the streets? That's kind of how I'm seeing this thing, and I'm a little concerned. Now, it goes on, it says, media framing versus evidence reality. There's a sharp divide between what's substantiated, government plans to release UFO-related material, and growing public and political pressure for transparency. Well, I think if the last operation's any clue, they don't need evidence, because people are so susceptible to authority figures. Hilarious to me how a person of one party affiliation, doesn't really matter which party, will bend the knee to an authority figure from a person of the other affiliation, just like sheep. Just like sheep. It says, media farming versus evidence reality. What is not confirmed? Secret meetings with pastors. This has not been confirmed. Claims of alien species, reptilians especially, not confirmed. Any official warning about faith collapse, not confirmed. The pastor briefing story remains unverified and largely anecdotal. But remember, this is often how these things start out. They put it out there, they test the waters, they let it percolate, you could say metastasize, across the internet, across social media, just to kind of see what happens. Now, here's the big picture analysis that AI gives us. This story sits at the intersection of three powerful currents: government transparency momentum. UFO disclosure is moving from fringe to mainstream policy discussion. Now, that is a thought, but in my opinion, a pipe dream, because where is the transparency? We still are not getting unredacted files. Now, there's cultural anxiety about ontological shock. There's increasing focus on how humanity would react psychologically and spiritually to proof of non-human intelligence. Yeah, they might go crazy. They might quit paying their taxes. They might start not being compliant. Religious prepositioning, whether real or speculative, the idea of briefing pastors suggests recognition that religion could be one of the most impacted institutions. Well, if a person's whole reality is just rocked that much, yes, it could. It could wipe out centuries of religious belief, in my opinion, because people have been so hemmed in. They're boxed in this little tiny space that if you bring in evidence, that it's going to cause so much cognitive dissonance in their minds that they're not going to be able to handle it. When I talked about the whole COVID thing 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it's been now, and pointed out some things that just didn't make sense, like the idea that a 2-year-old child on a cancer ward would be denied a medically necessary procedure. You can look that up. That's a fact. Because the hospital felt like a 60-year-old person, somebody my age or older, might need a hospital bed. When I said those kind of things, it caused so much cognitive dissonance in the minds of about half my audience that they got angry, left nasty, hateful comments, and quit listening, and probably torpedoed the trajectory of the podcast. But I couldn't sit back and not say anything. As I said at the time that happened, my dad was having a heart operation, and we spent several days in the hospital just above the children's cancer ward, and every day getting off and on that elevator, seeing these little precious 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old children getting off that elevator, going into the children's hospital. The thought that one of those children could have been denied medical care because I would need a hospital bed infuriated me. This is the level of deception that we're dealing with, and I think it could be the same exact level of deception headed to us with this so-called disclosure coming up. Otherwise, why would they need to talk to these pastors? Other than to control people, to pacify people, to keep people manageable. Instead of just saying, well, there's this website called the Black Vault. He keeps asking us for all of these different files, and we keep sending him blacked out pages. Let's go ahead and send him the pages that aren't blacked out. How would that be for disclosure? We know you have this stuff. You don't have to go looking for it. Just send us the pages that aren't blacked out. But no, they don't want to do that. They want to control this narrative. They want to expand this narrative. They want to develop a particular marketing campaign to every single marketing segment, whether you're a religious person, a non-religious person, a working class person, an upper middle class person, somebody who views themselves as an independent thinker, somebody who views themselves as just a go along, get along person, somebody who's just out to have fun, world traveler. Whatever your market segment is, they want to have the advertising campaign that reaches you, that influences you, that keeps you manageable. Doesn't matter if it's about UFOs, doesn't matter if it's about joining the military, doesn't matter. Whatever current agenda that the government has, they want to keep you with them on the page. Can you see that? Can you actually just stop and think about that? Can you see what's happening here? This level of thought control is out of control. Now, the bottom line is this. Yes, there are widespread claims that pastors have been warned or briefed ahead of the UFO disclosure. No, there is currently no verified evidence these briefings actually occurred, and the story reflects a broader shift where UFO disclosure is being framed not just as scientific or political, but as a potentially civilization-level spiritual event. So they're getting things prepped. They're preparing the narrative. They're getting this thing modeled. They're getting this thing whittled down. They're sculpting it in the perfect way to keep you in your lane. I'm going to stay on this for time's sake. We'll wrap this up here today, but later on, maybe over the next couple of weeks, we'll take a look at a couple of these different pastors, what they said, maybe look at the background of these pastors, and you can decide for yourself, are these guys, are they completely over the top, just trying to make themselves famous? Are they confused? Are they just tools of the deep state? Or are they being actually sincere, trying to help people? That'll be for you to decide. I can give you my opinion on it. I'm going to try to get through this whole topic without losing half my audience this time. I think we can still agree about things. We can disagree about things. But it's important that we're able to ask questions and each of us have our own opinions about stuff without hating each other. That would be a good start. And hopefully this is a place where we can all have a free exchange of ideas. Leave comments if you want. Just try not to curse people or call people names. Spotify's not going to want any part of that. Until next time, this is UFO Warning. Over and out.